Okay, let's push forward with learning more about data frames. I have this data frame, df underscore student, all right, and we saw that with the function df underscore student data. I'm going to put I here and see what we can get in for. We have seen this, right? Info, you see that it's a function, so I have to put parentheses in front of it, and sure enough, it gives me information about the data frame. This is very helpful because especially this non-null count, we know how many potentially missing values we may have. Let's look at one more very useful feature function of pandas. Oftentimes, we are dealing with very huge data sets. And when you are dealing with huge data sets, at the beginning, there's not much point try to look at the whole data frame. It might be very helpful just to look at the first few rows or last few rows, or just take a random sample from that data frame. All right, and those are all easily available in pandas. df.student data head. This is going to give you first 5 rows of the data frame. You can have a look at the first 5 rows and get a feel of this data frame. Then you see that by default, it gives me first 5 rows. If I put a number here, let's say 3, it is going to give me first 3 rows. If there's head, there's tail as well, right? So I'm going to have df underscore student data tail. By default, this gives me last 5 rows of this data frame from index 7 to 11. If I put a number here, let's say 2, it is going to give me just index 10 and 11. Index 10 and 11. All right. Oftentimes we may want to just draw a random sample from my data frame to just investigate, to have a look at it. All right. That is also easily possible. I'm going to get df on that student dot sample. All right. I don't know if sample is a function or what, so I'm going to just type SAM sample. There you go. It's a function, so I have to put parentheses in front of it. And it is going to give me just one random row from my data frame. If by chance it's the very first row or index 0. If I run it one more time, now it is the third row. Run it one more time, it is now the fifth row, and one more time, it is the very last row. All right. If you want more than one row as a random row, I'm going to just put a number here. You know what? I want 3 random rows from this data frame, and it is going to give me those 3 random rows from the data frame. Let's push forward. Another useful function that we oftentimes we use is df underscore students data. Let me see, shape. All right, I want I want to look at shape of this data frame. You notice that it's not a function, it's an instance. I'm going to first make a mistake, put parentheses in front of that shape, all right, parentheses, and see what we are going to get. As I mentioned in previous video, I'm getting object is not callable, which is a really strong sign that you are putting parentheses where you shouldn't. Right? If I go back and get rid of these parentheses, it is going to say your your data frame is of shape of 12 by 6, which means 12 rows and 6 columns. Now you see that this is a tuple. If you don't trust me, this is a tuple. Let's look at type of it. All right, I'm going to say what is the type of that, and it is going to say it's a tuple. All right. If it's a tuple, then remember tuple is a sequence. I can access its members. What do I mean by that? df student data shape, right? It's 12 by 6. If I want the very first one, number of rows, I'm going to give 0, and it is going to give me 12. If I want number of columns, I'm going to give it 1, give me the second member, and it is going to give me 6, the second one. All right, moving forward, we are going to look at indices and columns, or index and column. Let's see, df underscore student data in index. All right, you see that it's an instance, it's not a function. So I'm not going to use any parentheses in front of it, and sure enough, it is going to say it's a it starts from 0, it stops at 12 with step size of 1, but it does not include 12. Right? In a similar manner, df underscore student data columns. I don't know if this is an instance or it's a function. Well, if index is instance, most likely this one is also instance as well. Let's have a look. columns, you see that it's an instance. If I put parentheses in front of it, I'm going to get an error. Columns, it says your columns are, these are the columns, right? Student, it's a list, and student ID, first name, last name, Python grade, operations grade, and age. Oftentimes, especially at the beginning of exploring a new data set, we need to rename these columns for the sake of consistency, for the sake of cleaning the data. How do we do that? Well, that is pretty straightforward. There are several ways of doing it. This is the one that we usually use. Let's say I want to change that student ID to student underscore ID. But if you notice, Python underscore grade, it starts with capital P. Operations grade starts with capital O. Age starts with A. But first name and last name, these are lower cases. So I'm going to fix all of those again for the sake of consistency. How do we do that? With a rename function, right? I'm going to say df underscore student dot rename. All right. If you don't know what rename does, just put a question mark in front of it and you are going to read that. All right. You are going to see what you are. It's going to provide information with lots of examples here. But just to keep our videos short, I'm going to say it's a rename columns equal to. All right. Now I'm going to provide a dictionary. Dictionary keys are going to be old names. Values are going to be new names. I want student ID. Where is that? Student ID to be what? To turn into student underscore ID. Right. I also want, I want first name, first underscore name to turn into first underscore name. And I want last name with a lowercase l, last underscore name to be last name. All right. Again, I'm using rename function. And what do you want to rename? I want to rename some of the columns. You can rename all columns as well, but it's going to be a lot more work. And student ID is the old name. New name is going to be student underscore ID with capital S. First name, same thing. Last name, same thing. So let's run and see what we get. Right? It worked. Did it work? df student ID, first name. Did I make a mistake? Oh, there we go. Students ID. All right. So let's just let's say I want to change student's ID to student underscore ID. All right. And let's run it one more time. Sure enough. All right. It didn't work initially because I was providing a column name that wasn't there. All right. Now this is a lot more consistent. It's I can access them with dot operation if I want to access each of these columns. Let's call df underscore student and see what happens. All right. Df underscore student. To our disappointment, those columns are back. Those column names are back. All right. First name. You see, it shows us that data frame now. Oh, if you do the rename, this is what your data frame is going to look like. But then when I call data frame, those things are still there. Those not so desirable column names are still there. If you want to permanently change this, one way to do that is say, you know what, df underscore student is equal to df underscore, I'm going to just copy all of this from here because I don't want to type it. Copy and oops, paste. I'm saying df underscore student is equal to df underscore student dot rename all of those. All right. And if I run it now, I didn't get any error. Df underscore student. Beautiful. Now I have all of those column names in a consistent naming format. Now, if you want to rename all columns, you can do that, but you got to be very, very careful with the ordering. All right, we got to be very careful. This is one way to rename all the columns. This is also possible. Another way of renaming all columns, I'm going to say df underscore student. Let's say I want to change data, let me type this, columns is equal to, let's be a little bit careful here. Here I'm saying, you know what, I want these names to be column names. all right? And I'm going to provide those names in a list. What names do I want? Well, I want student, we can fast forward this part, student underscore ID. I'm changing to all capital, all right? First name, last name. Oh, let's be consistent. Python grade, Python underscore grade, operations grade, operations grade. What else? And finally, I have age. All right. And let's run this. Beautiful. df underscore student. And now I have all of those names changed. So I want you to notice a difference between first method of changing column names and second method. In the second one, you are giving column names and you have to provide all of that. But in the first one, if you want to change one or two column names, this is the better way of doing it. All right. One more thing I want you to pay attention to. Let me go back here. df underscore student dot rename question mark. Now notice there is one parameter here called in place, and by default it is false. Let me explain what that is. When we change the column names earlier, let me go back here. Earlier when I changed the column names, I renamed them. When I changed them and call DataFrame again, where is that? Call DataFrame again, the column names that didn't change, right? Because that change of name, it wasn't in place. Let me show all of this with one example, all right? What I'm going to do, I'm going to, oh boy, I'm going to go back. There we go. I'm going to recall, this is a good practice as well. I'm going to copy all of this. Go all the way down here. There we go. Put it right here. Student info I defined again. I'm going to define df underscore student is equal to pd data data frame of what? Student info and df underscore student. Now again, those wrong names are back. Those names that not wrong, those names that are not very desirable, they are back. I showed you can change all of them using df data columns equal to all the new names. Here's another way of doing it, but this time I'm going to use a different parameter here. I'm going to say df underscore student dot rename. Rename what? Rename, I'm only renaming a few columns. I'm going to say columns. Columns is equal to, we provide a dictionary. The very first one was student students, same mistake, students ID. Instead of this, I want students student underscore ID. All right, and first name, I want, instead of this, I want first name, and finally last name. Instead of this, I want last name. All right, let me run this and see what we are going to get. All right, it is going to show that yes, everything is beautiful, but if I call that data frame again, df underscore student, it is going to bring back all of those, because this is just a view and it does not change column names. If I want that to happen, I'm going to go back here. One of the parameters was in place equal to true. All right, by default it's false, in place equal to true. And if I do that and call data and df underscore students, you see that those column names are going to change. This parameter of in place, we are going to use it quite often, and it is an amazing feature of pandas, because a lot of times you are working with the data frames that are huge data frames. Creating copies of it could limit our memory. When we say in place equal to true, we don't really need to create another object and limit the memory use of or limit memory of the available memory of the computer.